As the government shutdown enters its second week, President Trump remains adamant that Democrats are responsible for the shutdown and for the potential layoffs of government employees. The White House says firings will happen if the government is not reopened soon.
We're ready to go back. You know, we have a record-setting economy. We have a record-setting country. Prices are way down. We're doing better than the country's ever done. And the Democrats hate seeing that. It's up to them. Anybody laid off, that's because of the Democrats.
A new CBS News poll finds many Americans are frustrated with the shutdown, disapproving of the White House, Republicans in Congress, and Democrats in Congress nearly equally. The poll also finds that those surveyed are worried about the impact the shutdown could have on the economy, with 49% saying they're very concerned and 31% saying they are somewhat concerned. On Sunday's Face the Nation, congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle blamed the opposing party for the shutdown, with Democratic leaders saying they're fighting for Americans' health care and Republicans saying the Democrats are being unreasonable.
We have a health care crisis in America caused by the Republicans. They've barreled us towards a shutdown because they don't want to deal with that crisis.
There's probably 400 different ideas on how to fix that, but we need a little time to do it. We're not saying that we won't negotiate it. We're saying turn the lights back on in Congress.
Man, oh man. Welcome to Finance Unfiltered.
I'm the doc.
And I'm Nadine. And listen, you cannot be anywhere and not hear about the government shutdown. It is really crazy.
I think, as a country, all of us are trying to figure out what's going on. One side is blaming the other side. The other side is saying I'm right. The other side is saying I'm right. At the end of the day, I don't think it's really who's right and who's wrong. I think it's more so of a math problem. And I think we're going to get more into depth with that because I think it's very, very important. Once you understand really the math, you can really see where the problem is coming from.
Today, we really get to dive into some of the math behind why the government may be shut down. But more importantly, are you headed for a shutdown in your own personal finances, right? So that's what we're going to dive into today, because that's what it's all about. I mean, right now, our government's at a standstill, right? So one side is saying, they want this. The other side saying they want this. They can't agree. And, many people really have trouble wrapping their head around our government not agreeing.
Correct.
But when it comes to our own lives, sometimes we're at a standstill, in our own lives too. I mean, have you ever been at a standstill with your wife, Doc?
Oh man, plenty of times. You try to be nice about it, but sometimes, and it's a normal thing, right? Everybody have what they value, and sometimes you have to find a way to be able to work it out. She might want something, I might want something different, and sometimes we don't talk about it. She might go get it, and it might take me off a little bit, and it can become very combative if you don't really address it early on, right? And that's the thing about making sure that you sit down and properly plan to make sure that both sides are on the same page. Not even just husband and wife. You can have friends that can have, a shutdown when there's this disagreement. It happens every day in our lives. The question is, how do we resolve it? It's not about who's right, because everybody feel like they're right. So what is the main issue? Let's figure that out, and we'll get to the end of the problem.
That's for sure. I mean, I remember once I like house stuff for gifts, and I really wanted this dining room table that was, was kind of expensive, and my husband bought it for me for Valentine's Day. So this is February. And after he buys the table, he looks at me and goes, and don't ask for nothing else for the rest of the year. And I'm like, what you mean? It's February, so we at a standstill now in February. I can't have nothing else for the rest of the year, right? So it's not uncommon for people to have disagreements when it comes to budgets, spouses, kids, right? Kids want everything. They want, they don't want to hear no. They want this game and this shoe and this.
That's
and
right.
So, just like we come to standstills in our personal lives. I mean, in marriages, sometimes at least the one person sleeping on the couch, right? But the government's now facing this sort of thing just on a much larger scale, where you have two sides that can't come to an agreement. And it's kind of caused a shutdown. when you look at it, right, it's easy to blame one side over the other, but we're not here to make a decision on whose fault it is, but we would like you to think about it from a mathematical standpoint, because we can't control the government. We're one small piece of the pie. We play our part, right? But when it comes to actually having control, that's something we can't do. But who we can control, though, is ourselves. So it's all about avoiding a shutdown in your own personal life. When it comes to the government, is there a way for us to even know, like, kind of what's going on in that area?
My mentor showed me something about a U.S. debt clock. I'm like, man, what is a U.S. debt clock? And when he showed it to me, it blew my mind. And I'm going to show it to you guys exactly what it looks like. It looks very, very confusing and very detailed, but just look at it, because when I first saw it, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. So if you look at this, you see a whole bunch of numbers moving and constantly changing. The U.S. debt clock was developed sometime around like the 1989, 1990. And what it does is it gives us a clear picture on what is going on with the country when it comes to its finances. And when I saw this, it shocked me. I'm like, man, as a person, I have a budget. So that means the country as a whole has to also have a budget. And what does that budget look like? As citizens, we have and deserve the right to know what is going on with the country, right? If you look at this debt clock, you can find information about GDP. You can find information about how much taxes have been paid, how much income has been made by a person or by a company. You can find out how much debt we're in, how much credit card debt, how much student loan debt, how much income has, was at a certain point, how much is it now? What about Social Security? It's a big concern. Where are we right now? When is it going to run out? There's so much critical information that we can identify from this U.S. debt clock. And you can simply Google it. You go to Google, type in U.S. debt clock, and it'll come up. And this is so vital, because think about it. A lot of people are in debt, and it's a big issue. But guess what? Our country is also in debt. And when you sit down and look at all these fights, Republican, Democrat, it's not about personal ego. It's about the country not being able to properly balance itself. At the end of the day, you have to know what's coming in and what's going out. And if there's a negative relationship, there's going to be a problem. And that, I think, is where we are right now as a country, is that there's so much debt and we are paying so much interest on those debts that it's impossible to keep up with what's going on. And if we don't fix this issue or come up with a plan on how to bring these things down, it's going to be a huge problem. And this also tells us how much impact this debt is having on us as a country. And it affects every family and every individual. So I really, really encourage you guys to spend some time on this U.S. debt clock and learn it and study it to find out exactly what's going on in the country. Forget about all the arguments. Look at the numbers, because the numbers tell you where the problems are.
And when you look at it, I know when I first looked at it, one of the biggest things that stood out to me was the income, right? The income, and, looking at how it is that how the government tracks how much money they're going to get in. And when you think about it, how are like most people doing when it comes to bringing in the amount of income they need just to be able to sustain? Because if our government has to track income and expenses, you think that we should, as people, as a big entity like our government has to have a balance sheet, shouldn't we have a balance sheet?
Oh, 1,000%. And I think that's a problem, right? Is that most people, when you mention the word budget, they think it's a curse word, or they don't want to hear about it, right? They just want to live and enjoy their lives. Most people have the mindset of YOLO, you only live once, right? And sometimes when you don't do checks and balances, and it goes on for a very long time, you get to a point where, as an individual or as a family, you are going to shut down.
Behind the Instagram lifestyle, millions are one step from financial crisis. But what's the real story behind most people's finances? The hard data show that millions are under serious financial pressure. This isn't about being judgmental, it's about being aware. Here are 5 key warning signs. Car debt, high monthly payments on assets that lose value. Lifestyle debt, record high credit card balances with steep interest rates. Retirement gaps, a significant shortfall in what people have saved versus what they'll need. Savings rates, many households are spending more than they earn. Net worth illusions, wealth that's tied up in a primary home, not in productive assets. Understanding these points is the first step to building a stronger financial future.
That clip just gave some really serious points that we'll kind of dive into as we go through today's episode. But we're going to start with one of the first places that you start when you're thinking about how is it that you manage your budget. I try not to use budget too much. I call it a cash flow plan because really that's what it is. It's a plan for your money. It's a plan for you to figure out instead of wondering, anybody ever get paid on Friday? And you know, YOLO, okay, it's the weekend, YOLO. But by Monday, you looking at your account like, where in the heck did my money go? You know, I just had this and now I got what happened, right? Instead of feeling like that, you can actually empower yourself by having a plan for where your money will go. This amount will go to my mortgage or rent. This amount will go to my gas and electric and utilities. This amount will go here. And in that way, you're telling your money where to go instead of wondering where in the heck did my money go, right? When it comes to income, I dare say we're facing an income crisis in the U.S.
Even if you look at the debt clock, the U.S. debt clock I just showed a few minutes ago, the evidence is right there. Right? It's right there. If you look at since the 2000s, how much income people were making, and you compare that to now, 2025, what the income is, it's shocking. You can easily see that incomes have not gone up all that much. But yet, if you look at the cost of homes or assets, right, in the early 2000s, and if you look at the cost of these now, they have gone up 2-3 times. Look at median income from 2000. It's at $32,000. In 2025, it's at $48,000. You can see that the income has not gone up by that much. But look at the median cost of a new home. In the 2000s, it was $167,000 on average. But in 2025, it's over $400,000. That's more than double. Look at the average car. Back then in 2000, it was $22,000. Now we are almost $50,000. Once again, what? There's a doubling. You see the incomes are not doubling, but yet cost of goods and things are what? Doubling. So it's putting a lot of pressure on the individual citizen or the country to be able to sustain. Because if enough income is not coming in, or the income is not growing with inflation or growing with the cost of goods, how can we sustain as individuals or as a country? It's almost impossible. Sure. So we have a real serious income problem.
When you look at the government in general, if you cue the slides again, what you'll notice is that the government also has to track income. So the first step in any cash flow plan is really to track income. And if you take a look at the U.S. debt clock, one of the things you'll notice is that's one of the first things you see. How much income do we bring in? And where does it come from? You know, does it come from taxes, payroll taxes, state taxes? Where does the money come from? And that's the very important first step when you're talking about your own personal finances and figuring out if you're headed for a shutdown. Correct. How much income do you have coming in? Correct. Now, it's important to note that for many people, their primary source of income is not their only source of income, right? The government has other sources of income too, right? They have money that they receive from bonds and real estate and land and the stock market and gold and other assets. And so what are some other ways that people don't think about that they actually have money coming in, Doc, where they actually could include that money into their total cash flow planning?
Just think about it. If you look at what the government is doing, it tells you exactly what's going on and how you as an individual can either do the same thing or be better. It shows you here that the government has at least 6 ways that it earns money. So why do we as individuals have one way of earning money? The government clearly understands that I need a lot of money, a lot of sources, because why one source can shut down or can go bad. So if it goes down, I don't want to be stuck holding it back. What? I want to be able to have other sources coming in so I can still continue to maintain a standard of life. And when you're doing a budget analysis, most people focus on the big ticket items, the mortgage, the car note, the credit card debt, the student loan debt, right? They focus on the big ticket items and where their money is going. But sometimes, or most times, they underestimate or they omit the small stuff. And to me, in my experience, that's where a lot of the problem come from, because those small things, they add up. Like the saying goes, little drops of water make what? A mighty ocean. If you keep omitting the small things, eventually they become the big thing. Would you agree, Dean?
That is so key. I work with so many people on cash flow planning, and many people, they only allot for those big things, their car and their utilities. And then they're trying to figure out, but why don't I have any money? Yeah. Well, you forgot about some of that stuff. Some of the stuff that you are spending money on that people forget about. Number one, eating out. People underestimate the amount of money they spend on eating out. Now, the goal of a cash flow plan, most people think of it as being restrictive. That's right. It's really about empowering yourself. If you go back and look at the past 3 months of history of eating out, whether you look at your bank statements, you look at your Cash App, you look at if you use major credit cards, you look at that and you figure out, how much am I really spending on this? Yes. Now, once you know, you can make a decision. You can say, is this something I want to continue to do? Or do I have a more important goal that I like to achieve? And I can reallocate some or all of this money to that goal instead of this particular one. So eating out is a big one. Another one are subscriptions, right, Doc?
I can't tell you how many times when I sit with a client and do a budget analysis, that is one of the small but major ones. That they oh man, I didn't realize that I was spending money on all this. Sometimes they have two of the same thing, but two different companies, same thing. It makes no sense because they don't take the time to sit down and do that analysis. Doing a budget forces you, as you mentioned, it's not restrictive, it's actually freedom. Because if you see where your money is going, you can make changes.
Yeah. And don't kill me, ladies, but one of the biggest ones for us is grooming, right? Ladies tend to spend a lot of money in the grooming area, whether that's getting your hair done, nails done, lashes, wigs, massages, waxing, right? And that's fine. And not only that, we also get some of those things done for our children, haircuts and hairdos. And, you know, if it's a girl, you might take her to get some nails. And, you know, so we spend a lot of money in that area. But unfortunately, it's an area that's often overlooked when it comes to figuring out cash flow planning, which can really put you in a negative because now you're pulling money from areas that are not supposed to be pulled from to pay for those things just because you didn't include them in your plan. Absolutely. Are there any other areas you normally see where people might overlook?
Grocery shopping. I see that quite a bit. Sometimes, right, people go to the store and when you ask them, how is it possible that you spend this much and it's just me, only three of you guys in the house? And I ask them, do you guys actually make a list before you go to a grocery store? And say, oh man, I never did that. I know it's important because think about it. If you don't make a list of what you need, you go to the store. Our natural habit is to buy off impulse. Yeah. You buy something that you never thought you even needed. Sometimes you might even have the same thing already in your pantry. But because you didn't take inventory of what you were missing or what you needed, you're going to go buy something. Now you have two of the same things, and it's impossible for you to be able to what? Use it before they expire, right? Mm-hmm. So making sure to make a list, because that would dictate how much money you spend. Say, hey, look, I need this, and this. So when you go to a store, you've allocated a certain amount of money that you plan to spend at the store. You could take cash when you go. Because if you take cash and that money runs out, oh well. But most people rely on what?
Their cards.
Because it's easy to spend. So when you go there, you just put everything in a cart and you swipe. You don't realize how much that stuff sets you back. Once again, the purpose of this is not to make you restrictive or to make money boring. It's to give you liberation and freedom. Because once you can identify where your money is going, you can redirect the money and put it into resources that help you to use to pay off debt faster and build more wealth for yourself now and for the future.
And that leads us right into the very next thing that many of us are spending money on. And it's something that you really don't like to talk about, and that is debt.
Start focusing on what's going on in your house. Most Americans are in debt. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're trying to save that money, but they can't get out of their own way. Then when you can start saving that money, save 10 grand. Amazing. Half you're like 10 grand. How the hell am I going to get there? The other half are like 10 grand. I got 300 grand in the bank. But very few people are able to do that. Once you can get to green, you can become an investor. Last point. It's called personal finance for a reason. It's called personal responsibility for a reason. It's called self-reliance for a reason, because it's on you, bro. You know, they say 80% of the people don't care about your problems and 20% of the people are happy you have them.
The way they put it is very matter of fact. But the reality is it's called personal finance for a reason, right? It's all about your personal finances. And when you look at statistics, you have people spending about 40% of the money they bring in on debt. Unfortunately, that's an area that people often overlook when they're doing their cash flow planning. They account for their car because they needed to go back and forth for work, but they don't account for those credit card bills and loans and other things that need to be paid on a monthly basis. Have you seen debt skyrocket in your years as a financial advisor?
You know, debt to me in finance is a financial cancer, right? Because it really cripples you and stops you from doing a lot of things that you want to do or accomplish, like buying a home, you know, or paying for kids or saving for your kids' education, or, you know, buying something you plan to buy within the next 5 years, right? If you have a lot of debt, don't forget those debts are not free. They come with significant interest, right? If you look at credit card debt today, as you saw on the U.S. debt clock, right? The credit card debt is in the trillions. But guess what? Imagine how much interest is being paid on those credit cards. The average credit card today interest is maybe 25, 30%. Now think about it. If you got a $30,000 credit card debt and you are paying 30% interest on that debt, how long is it going to, and most people pay the minimum on those debts. How long is it going to take you to eliminate a $30,000 debt at a 30% interest rate? We don't pay attention to these things, right? That's why you have to be very careful. Even as a professional in finance, monthly, I sit down with my spouse and we do a budget, or we discuss it to figure out what's coming in and what's going to go out. Because the idea is we are trying to spend our money in the same way every month. Yes, something's going to come out of nowhere, but the more you spend time focusing on those things, you're able to control it much better. You don't want to just say, you know what, I'll deal with it. That's the wrong attitude. Because if you say, I'll deal with it later on come, you keep putting it all over and over, and it becomes a bigger issue. Think about it. You go to the bank, you go save money. They give you a tiny bit of interest rate. But yet when you go borrow money, rate is so high. It's almost impossible to pay for, right? And to me, that's also part of how the banks make money. But if you cannot pay for your debts, what's going to happen to you? Eventually, you're going to have to file for bankruptcy. That's a shutdown.
You're going to be in a shutdown.
Most people are so focused on the government shutdown. This is about your own personal shutdown and how to prepare to avoid it. Because if you don't change what you're doing, at some point, you're going to be forced to shut down. And when it gets to that point, it's almost impossible to fix it.
And many people are in denial about the fact that they're headed towards a shutdown. And when you look at the numbers, you know, as I'm always going to say, I know in my household growing up, money wasn't a topic that we could discuss freely. Okay. You know, it wasn't something where you felt comfortable going around talking to people about. And unfortunately, culturally, that's true. That still holds true for many of us. And so we try to handle things on our own. And we think, oh, if I have this many credit cards and I pay an extra $20 here and $30 here, we're doing okay. And I sit down with people sometimes who are doing just that. You know, a couple comes to mind that I sat down with that were recently married when I sat down with them, and they were kind of handling their finances separately. The husband had his things going on, the wife had her things going on, and they enjoyed doing it that way. But I just simply asked them if just looking at them together could help you all get out of debt 5, 10, 15 years sooner and save you hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest, would it be worth looking at? And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. They still didn't believe me though, right? So we sat down and looked at it, and at the end they had 15 debts. 15. They had cars, every credit card you could imagine. And their minimum payments every month were about $3,400. And they were paying an additional $1,100. They add another $100 here, $200 there. And they in their early 50s. When I plugged their information into our software, what I found out was that if they continued to do things the way that they were doing them and didn't add any more debt, it was going to take them till they was 95. Alarming. 95.
Very alarming. You probably be dead by then.
You see how people die in debt and really are in denial, like, no, I'm paying extra, it's going to go away, right? But I'm not sure if you know this, but debt is designed to never pay off. It's designed to keep you in debt. And so we were able to help them create a plan. You guys aren't going to believe it. They was going to be out of debt in 8 years.
Whoa.
From
before 60.
8 years. And then if they started to actually invest that $4,400 that they were spending on their debts, and they were in their 50s at that point, by retirement age of 67, if they earn below average returns, of 9%, they could have an additional $1.1 million at retirement just from using their debts. So the biggest thing about cash flow planning is so that you can look at where you can take money and reallocate it so that one day you can achieve your financial goals, because you do not have to be a millionaire. You got to have money. I used to think you had to have money to one day have money. You know what I mean, Doc?
It's so amazing what you just shared. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the exact same. I could show you client after client after client. And that's why I love doing a needs analysis, because it identifies and reveals holes, or reveals places where money has been wasted, where it can be taken and properly allocated. And people are always so shocked, like, is this really real? Yes, right? Because remember, everybody has debt to some degree. It's not about the debt. It's how you pay the debt. It's having a strategy on how to pay the debt. That's what the Bible says. The borrower is what? Slave to the lender. Mm-hmm. When you are in debt, you are literally enslaved to the lender. Because at the end of the day, as long as you owe that debt, you're going to have to pay it. And the longer you take to pay that debt, the more interest you're going to pay that person by the time you're done. As my colleague said, the dean, it's not about the debt. It's how you pay the debt, right? So you have to really focus on it. And imagine a husband and wife making money and spending money separately. I can understand it, but at the end of the day, there has to be some level of uniformity if you guys want to achieve financial peace. Imagine paying off debt before 60 compared to 95. How much interest, hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest that you would have wasted because you failed to sit down and communicate and look at the debt. So that is truly a cancer. But if people can sit down and look at what they're doing and figure out how can we do better by restructuring how they're paying off their debts, they can be debt free. Listen, I'm a product of it. When I was younger, I had a boatload of it because I didn't know no better. But when I got better, I got more knowledgeable and understood. Like I said, when you know better, you do better, right? Yeah. So I'm not talking to you. I'm trying to explain and demonstrate to you that my own experience, when I apply the concepts of how to properly eliminate debt, before you know it, debt is going like this. Yes, there's still debt, but at least the bad debts. See, not all debts are bad. There's good debts and there's bad debts. There's some debts that are assets that can make you money. And there's some debts that take money out of your pocket. The key is to know the difference and figure out which ones to attack.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of what our government's going through right now, believe it or not. Yeah. Because just like, I mean, you think about the debts you have on a personal level. Oh my God, the car. Oh, the credit card. Oh, imagine on a larger scale, the debts that the government and the liabilities that our government has each and every day. What you'll notice is that the government has debts. What are some of the largest budget items? And this is right from the U.S. debt clock.
That's right.
They have Medicare and Medicaid as one of the largest budget items. Social Security,
it's major.
One of the largest budget items. Defense and war, and making sure our country is protected. And then here's one we talked about: interest on debt. Because if they borrow money, they have to pay interest as well, right?
Yes.
So you look at it. And the national debt, how much money our nation is in. You probably can't even say that number, right? It's so large of a number, but it breaks it down. Debt per citizen, debt per taxpayer. How much, if they broke down all that debt, how much we would all owe?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So, I mean, debt is a very challenging issue, not just personally, but also when it comes to our government. So if the government has to figure out how to deal with the income and revenues and expenses and debts, just to make sure that it can still run as a country, do you think it makes sense for us to do the same thing on a personal level?
Without a shadow of a doubt. That's why, everybody wants to talk about investing because it's so exciting. But what I realized in my experience, a lot of times people are apprehensive about sitting down and having a conversation because they don't want to open up Pandora's box because the debts are so high, right? Mm-hmm. You see, that should be the reason why you want to sit down with a professional, because at the end of the day, if you don't address it, it's going to become a bigger problem, which is going to cause you to shut down. The sooner you're able to figure out where things are and start making changes, the better you're going to do in the future.
There's nothing to be embarrassed about it also. One of the things that holds people back is pride. And, I'm a firm believer in the pride before the fall.
That's right.
So, again, culturally, it's something where people don't want to discuss it. However, if you don't get help, and it's interesting because we'll go get help with everything else, right?
That's right.
If you're not feeling well, the minute you get a sniffle, your head been hurting too long, your ankle hurt. Who we calling? Who we calling that?
That's right. Calling a doctor, man.
Call the doctor, right? Absolutely. And you and I were just discussing this earlier, but the minute somebody try to do you dirty, you feel like somebody's being unfair.
Hey,
you need some leeway, you're going to hit the lawyer up.
That's right.
But when it comes to your money, what's the best way to tackle your debts? What are some important aspects of your cash flow plan? How do you invest? Where do you invest? Why should you invest? You have questions like that. Who are people reaching out to? We are licensed financial professionals.
Absolutely.
However, it's so important for you to find a credible, reliable resource to reach out to, because everybody has their area of expertise.
That's right.
Just because someone's a great mom doesn't make them a great finance coach.
That's right.
Just because someone is a doctor,
that's right,
doesn't mean they understand
money,
finance.
Right.
I used to be a teacher. I could teach your kids, but before I got into finance, did that mean that I knew what I was doing financially?
That's right.
So it's important to find experts in the field that you're looking for assistance with and really hone in on your own personal finances.
It makes a difference. It makes a huge difference.
I mean, isn't that one of the reasons why we started this podcast in the first place, Doc?
Correct. You know, it's to be able to really open eyes and share information and be unfiltered. Because a lot of times people try to hide information, and you know that's to their advantage. But at the end of the day, yes, we are licensed professionals. We're not your advisor, right? So you always consult. At the end of the day, everybody wants to do better. They want to improve. But we're here to be able to share light and give you information, give you tools, give you resources. Guess what? If we can be of help, absolutely reach out. We can sit down, look at your individual situation. Remember, I can't give any blanket advice because everybody is in a different financial situation and different stage. Some young, midlife, older. So everybody's a bit different, right? But what we're saying is, here's the information. Take it, digest it. Whatever's applicable, take it. Whatever is not, you could dump it. But at least use us as a resource to be able to get on a financial journey. Because if you get on a journey and your house gets to be in order, life becomes even more fun and more exciting.
Absolutely. And speaking of resources, we're actually giving away a resource today. If you connect with us, yes. When you connect with us on the Link app, what you're going to receive is a copy of a budget worksheet. It is going to help you to actually get some of those ins and outs and things all together. This is the budget worksheet that we're offering for you. It'll just give you a guide as to, to looking at what you have coming in, going out, expense wise. So if you're looking for something that you can use in order to help you in that area, we are offering that when you connect with us on the Link app. So absolutely. Today has been all about some of the reasons you can see mathematically why the government's at a standstill, right? And how do you prevent your household, your family, your personal finances from being at a very similar standstill? That's right. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope we were able to provide value to you, which is our goal each and every time we connect with you. Look for our episodes airing every Friday at 12 noon Eastern time. We absolutely love to share and come to you all with current news and the best ways to handle things from our opinion when it comes to personal finance.
I remember when you and I first sat down to kind of discuss doing this, and man, I was so excited to share and get going because I knew that you and I are both a product of information and education and proper planning, right? And that's what we want to give to you guys. Once again, use it as a resource. We know you may have a lot of other channels you may be watching that get great information, no problem. But we could be one of those sources that you come to get great ideas, great insight, and great information. And as always, please don't forget to share, to subscribe, and tell your friends and family about the Doc and the Dean because we're here to stay and give you all that you need. All right.
Absolutely. Connect with us on IG and on Facebook, as we will be sharing clips and financial tips and resources that can also assist you throughout the week. Again, I am the Dean.
And I am the Doc.
And thank you for tuning in. See you next Friday.
Next Friday. Take care, everybody. Bless.